From terrifying megafauna to monstrous marine predators, here is our list of prehistoric animals we are glad are extinct. And be sure to stay until the end to learn about one creature that was so big, it shook the world. First, we have to look at Megatherium. What a cute name. Now imagine seeing this creature standing over 20 feet tall in your backyard munching on some flowers. You wouldn't stand a chance. This giant ground sloth moved slower than molasses in January, but it didn't need to be quick to crush a human. Its huge size alone would have been enough to step on us like an insect. Its scientific name is actually Megatherium americanum, which means big beast of America. Fossils of this gentle giant have been found all over North and South America, showing that this species thrived across the continent. Some scientists say these super sloths probably used their giant claws to strip bark off trees and reach leaves high above the forest floor. But given the chance, we hope they would use their strength for good instead of evil. Moving on, let's look at Titanoboa. This is the supersized snake that makes today's serpents seem tiny by comparison. Measuring over 50 feet long, this prehistoric serpent was as long as a bus and thicker than a doorway. That's the size of the biggest land animal alive today. In fact, this gargantuan reptile was so huge that it could easily crush crocodiles with ease, making an anaconda or python seem as harmless as a garter snake. The Titanoboa lived in what is now Mexico and the southern United States between 30 and 15 million years ago. But if it still roamed the earth today, swimming in rivers would be a death wish. We don't know how well snakes can swim anyway. Next, let's take a look at Spinosaurus. Most people think of the T-Rex as the king of the dinosaurs. But back in the Cretaceous period around 95 million years ago, there was a much larger meat eater, the Spinosaurus. This monster was bigger than a T-Rex and almost twice as heavy. It was also semi-aquatic and had a crocodile-like snout and massive claws. So you might call it a dinosaur version of a nightmare. The remains of this ferocious dino were first discovered in Morocco, and paleontologists believe it spent a lot of time in the water catching fish. It probably waded into shallow rivers and used its powerful claws to slice through the water and grab slippery prey. How do you feel about swimming in the ocean now? Now let's see what Arthropleura has to offer. This giant millipede could grow over 8 feet long and reached a width of 15 inches. Just imagine a centipede the size of a surfboard crawling through your garden. No thanks. These horrifying bug-like creatures lived during the Carboniferous and Permian periods between 359 and 299 million years ago. They're thought to have fed on decaying plant matter and other organic debris on the forest floor. Given their huge size and many legs, they probably took quite a while to starve. If you encounter one of these today, though, you better run away fast. Next, we have to look at Dunkleosteus. This enormous fish had a thick, armored hide and bone-crushing jaws. It had no teeth, only sharp plates to slice through flesh and crunch bones. It was also blind as a bat and couldn't hear a thing. But it didn't need eyes or ears to survive because its sense of smell was incredibly acute. Even the smallest trace of blood in the water would send this underwater terror into a feeding frenzy. The Dunkleosteus lived in the Devonian Sea that covered much of eastern North America, and Europe around 360 million years ago. It grew to a length of 30 feet and weighed almost a ton. For this reason, it was one of the largest known predatory bony fish that ever lived. Humans weren't around yet, but if they were, we would have quickly become its favorite snack. Now let's take a look at terror birds. These flightless, carnivorous birds are one of the most fascinating examples of evolution in action. They evolved from ancestors that flew over from the Old World and evolved into huge flightless birds in South America. Today, they're known as the apex predators of their ecosystem, standing up to 10 feet tall and weighing over 70 pounds. They could run at terrifying speeds and likely hunted in packs to bring down large prey. Some scientists believe terror birds hunted and picked apart their prey before taking flight. Others think they were too heavy to fly and scavenged dead carcasses instead. But regardless of how they got their food, we're glad these raptors are extinct. Moving on, let's look at Quetzalcoatlus. Back in the late Cretaceous period, when the Rocky Mountains were still being formed, there was a huge animal soaring overhead. With a wingspan of 40 feet, the Quetzalcoatlus was one of the largest flying animals that ever lived. To put its size into perspective, the wingspan of a California condor is 9.5 feet. So this prehistoric bird had nearly 4 times the wingspan. This huge, flying creature was an opportunistic hunter that probably ate fish, reptiles, and smaller vertebrates. But its favorite snack was probably carrion, or the carcasses of dead animals. It would scoop up rotting meat and take it to the sky, where it would feed high above the forest canopy. It also possibly snatched up small animals, and maybe even people. Moving on, let's look at Andrewsarchus. This mammal looks like a monster, but it was a real animal that lived in Wyoming between 55 and 60 million years ago. It had a wolf-like head and a body that resembled a pig on steroids. Scientists think the Andrewsarchus was a ferocious predator that lived near rivers and lakes and dominated coastal ecosystems with its brute force. It was probably solitary and used its huge jaws and powerful limbs to capture prey. Few animals were safe from this vicious beast. It was one of the top predators in its environment and likely hunted anything it could catch, including turtles, fish, and mammals. Fortunately for us, it went extinct before humans evolved, or we might have been on the menu. Next, let's take a look at Megalodon. This gigantic shark was the apex predator of the oceans between 23 and 3.6 million years ago. It was about 60 feet long and weighed over 100 tons. To put its size into perspective, the biggest shark alive today is the whale shark, which reaches a maximum length of 40 feet. That means the Megalodon was almost twice the size of the biggest shark alive today. It was so huge that it made modern great whites look like minnows. The Megalodon was also incredibly fast and could swim up to 30 miles per hour. It had a huge bite force of over 10,800 pounds, which allowed it to easily crush bones and chomp through flesh. It wasn't picky about its food either. It ate pretty much anything it wanted, including whales, dolphins, seals, sea turtles, and even sharks. If this monster were still around today, surfing would be suicide. Finally, we have to look at Anomalocaris. This alien-looking sea predator was one of the largest and most ferocious animals of its time. It lived in the Cambrian period over 500 million years ago and ruled the oceans with an iron fist. The Anomalocaris was about 10 feet long and had a huge angular shell with stalked eyes on stalks. It also had spiny, grabbing limbs that it used to capture prey. The Anomalocaris was so weird that when it was first discovered, paleontologists thought it was a single species. Now they believe that the Anomalocaris was actually a group of different species. But regardless of how many types there were, they all looked like something from a sci-fi horror film. And we're glad they're extinct. But now it's time to make your voice heard. Comment below which of these prehistoric monsters was the most terrifying. If you want to see my short videos, check out my second channel. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, then what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel.